Hi AMP1 students. In this video we are going to talk about the autonomic nervous system. So we are in chapter 15 that is going to describe some information about the autonomic nervous system. So this chapter has information that you will not be responsible for. So I've completed the learning objectives for this chapter, and I've answered those objectives in kind of in an outline format. So hopefully that'll help you as you learn the information that you need to know for the autonomic nervous system. All right, so the first thing that we're going to talk about, we're going to go back to the beginning of chapter 12. And just to remind you that when we were looking at how we organize the nervous system, we do it structurally. So that would be the CNS and PNS are the two main divisions. And then we also look at the peripheral nervous system, and we'll look at the two different divisions of the motor nervous system. So remember, the motor nervous system contains those motor neurons that are taking signals from the central nervous system, so the brain and spinal cord, out to the peripheral organs. So either out to skeletal muscles or to smooth muscles, cardiac muscle, or glands of the body. And then when we look at those motor neurons, we'll notice that some of them are taking the information from the CNS to the skeletal muscles, and we call those somatic motor neurons. So that's the group of motor neurons that are taking signals to skeletal muscles in the body. And we've talked about this, this is kind of what we focused on through chapter 12, and is the motor neurons of the somatic nervous system. But this chapter is going to focus on the autonomic motor neurons, those motor neurons that are also taking the signal out from the CNS to the peripheral organs, but this signal or information is going to go to cardiac muscle, smooth muscles, and glands. So that's what this chapter 15 is about the autonomic motor neurons and how that system is organized, so what its anatomy is, and then what its function is as well. Okay, so I'm going to we're in chapter 15. I'm going to head back to our objectives. So the first objective is to understand that the autonomic nervous system has two divisions of its own. So, and those two divisions are it's called the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. So those are the two divisions of the autonomic nervous system. So that just means that some of those motor neurons that are taking signals to the cardiac muscles, smooth muscles, and glands are called sympathetic motor neurons. And then some of those that are taking signals to those same tissues are called parasympathetic motor neurons. And these two divisions of the autonomic nervous system, the parasympathetic and sympathetic, you can kind of consider them opposite of each other. So what happens is, depending on what environment we're in, it will determine which of those motor neurons, the sympathetic or the parasympathetic, will be kind of controlling or sending more signals to the smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, and the glands of the body. So if we're in an environment where we're resting and we don't really need to be doing anything strenuous, anything exciting, anything fearful, then the motor neurons that are parasympathetic, they will be sending most of the signals to those cardiac muscles, smooth muscles, and glands, and that will maintain the homeostasis of our various body systems. And the whole goal is just to kind of conserve energy, so like kind of convert energy into ATP and kind of store it in the cell. And also to any nutrients, so like glycogen stores, those are built up too as well. So whether generally kind of the common name for the parasympathetic nervous system, they'll call it the rest and digest system, because it will be kind of in charge. sending more signals to the smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, and glands. And so it's kind of controlling those at that moment when we're at rest. And then when we're resting too, that's a good time for our digestive system. Any food that we've consumed, that's a good time for the breakdown of that food. And again, that's going to help with, providing a source of energy, and any nutrients that we gain from our food can be stored within cells of the body and other places. So that's the parasympathetic and its primary goal. Now, sometimes though we're in an environment where we're scared, we're excited, we're doing something strenuous, exercise, something like that. And so then we need our body systems to do things a little bit differently. We actually want to use that energy that we've stored, and we want to use those nutrients because our cells need them to perform some sort of work. And so the sympathetic motor neurons, that part of the autonomic nervous system, that is going to release those nutrients and use up that energy that was stored in order to, do what we need to do, whether it's exercise or, try to handle an emergency. So anytime we're just being more active, kind of the opposite of rest is when that will start to have, the sympathetic motor neurons will send more signals to those smooth muscle, cardiac muscles, and glands. So they will use the common name for that sympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system. They'll call it fight or flight. So you'll either, fight or you'll run away. So either way, both of those things are just going to require energy and some movement. And so those are the kind of the environments that we'll be in, in a 24-hour period. We'll have times where we're at rest and times where we need to be active and be doing something. And so there's a nice little balance between the parasympathetic motor neurons and the sympathetic motor neurons. They're controlling those cardiac muscles, smooth muscles, and glands so that they can, allow us to respond to whatever environment we're in the proper way. So, all right, so that is our two divisions of the autonomic nervous system. All right. So in the textbook, they talk about those two divisions. In this section, don't see a page number, sorry. But they'll talk about what we just kind of talked about. And then the next objective, we're going to talk about the similarities between these two systems. And we're going to use a picture to go over those similarities. So I'm going to, this is quite a large picture, which I can't get completely in the screen. I don't know if maybe I'll be able to, yeah, I think that might be worse. So we'll just keep it this way. Okay, so when it comes to the similarities between these two divisions of the autonomic nervous system, where the similarities lie is that the motor neurons that are, remember we're talking about the sympathetic motor neurons and the parasympathetic motor neurons. So they leave the central nervous system, and then they will take a information or a nerve impulse to the skeletal muscle, to the cardiac muscle, smooth muscle, and glands. So where they're similar is there's not just one motor neuron that leaves the central nervous system and goes all the way to the, like the salivary glands here. There's actually two. So when we're talking about the autonomic motor neurons, there's two of those that are leading from the CNS and taking that nerve impulse to the peripheral organs, again, cardiac muscle, smooth muscle, or glands. So there's two of those. So we have names for those because if you look where two neurons are going to communicate with each other, That's a little synapse. Generally, we will have multiple neurons. We're just showing one here, but realize there'll be multiple neurons kind of clustered together. And so remember that a clustered area of cell bodies and dendrites is called a ganglion. So in this little ganglion area, you'll see those. These are a little in this location, and then there's some that are in this location on these organs. But either way, the parasympathetic and the sympathetic motor neurons will have two neurons, and at the little ganglion where those two neurons communicate, we will, because we have a ganglion, we'll call the first motor neuron, that's the one that's leading from the central nervous system, we'll call it the pre-ganglionic motor neuron. So in this image, I think this is brown in color, all of these are considered pre-ganglionic motor neurons. And then the motor neuron that follows the ganglion, sometimes they'll just call it a ganglionic motor neuron, or you might see it called a post-ganglionic motor neuron. But so I think here they call it post-ganglionic. So all these green ones that you see here are considered post-ganglionic motor neurons. So this picture is showing the parasympathetic. And let me go to the next. I'm not sure if it's on the next one. I think it is. So realize that the sympathetic has that same setup. There's a motor neuron, and they're brown, so that's the pre-ganglionic ones. And then you'll have the second motor neuron that's after the ganglion, and we call that the ganglionic neuron or the post-ganglionic motor neuron. So that's a similarity between the parasympathetic and the sympathetic motor neurons. Is there's two of them that are getting the nerve impulse from the CNS to the cardiac muscle or smooth muscles or glands of the body. Okay, so I'm going to go back to our objectives here. So similarities, both use a preganglionic neuron and a postganglionic neuron, or sometimes you'll just see it referred to as ganglionic neuron. And of course, that's going to send, when I say innervate, that's a term that just means that it's taking a nerve impulse to that particular tissue. So these guys will innervate cardiac muscle, smooth muscle, or glands. And then the other thing that they have in common is that they have ganglia. So in the sympathetic one, the ganglia are located here. So those little round areas. And remember, ganglion are just a cluster of cell bodies and dendrites. And then in the parasympathetic one, oops, I don't need to do that. I need to go here. In the parasympathetic one, the ganglion were here. You could also see some here as well. So that is where their similarities lie, is they have two motor neurons that are, one's preganglionic, one's postganglionic, that are taking the signal from the CNS to the cardiac muscle, smooth muscle, and glands. And then they both have ganglion or ganglia, and they're called autonomic ganglia since it's autonomic motor neurons that are in those ganglia. Okay, so then I think what I'll do is end the video here, since we kind of got started on these got finished with the first objective and started on the second. And so then in the next video, we'll go over the differences. So there are more differences than there are similarities. So we'll go over those in the next video. So I'll see you in the next video.